Say g'day, say g'day. And there's some big smiles going on here.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for waking up first thing in the morning. I very much appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to chatting with y'all.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Perth guys. They're up at 4 a.m.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So shout out to everybody, but in particular Perth, 4 a.m. That is a good effort. Very good effort.
Yes.
John was saying you guys are an industrious lot, and we are. In Australia, we are definitely hardworking, and we've got a great bunch of people here, John. So I don't think we need to waste too much time with an introduction. Most of you know John. He's written just a few books, launched just a few very mega successful websites. But when I was talking about this with John, if he recalls, a few weeks ago, we were talking about, everybody knows his work in the online space with the Online Trainer Academy and how he's done such amazing work in that front. And everybody is aware of the PTDC, which has become the go-to resource for a lot of fitness professionals for unbiased and real information that's not overhyped, which is common in our industry. But I said to John, look, I don't know about you, but I feel like you might be a little bit sick of talking about online training in that capacity. And I want to give these guys something different, something real. And so I wanted to start, John, just by taking you right back to the start and just getting a little bit of an idea. When you were a personal trainer working in someone else's club, you had this idea to write a book, right? That was one of your first big shifts. Is that correct?
I didn't have an idea to write a book at all. I had an idea to somehow change my situation. And I had no idea how the heck that was going to happen. I mean, it was not a book. The book was funny that it came about because I had never written anything ever outside of school. I mean, it was not like I was the kid who was like doodling down stories in a notebook or whatever when I was young. It came kind of out of nowhere. I mean, look, I was a trainer, and I reached the point that a lot of trainers reach, where I needed to make a bit more in a bit less time with a bit better schedule, and didn't know how the heck to do it. And nobody taught me how to do it. And the only thing I knew was like, maybe I'm going to open up a gym. And so I literally went to the bookstore and looked at all of the best-selling books. This is like 2008. So you couldn't, there's stuff on the internet, but it wasn't like thrown in your face. Put it this way. You didn't get 10 or 15 people messaging you every day trying to sell you internet marketing advice. So I went to the bookstore and I signed out every single book I could find, or I looked at every single book that I could find on like marketing and multiple streams of income and whatever. And then I walked across the street to the library and I signed out those books out of the library. And I just started looking at what was out there. I mean, I didn't want to stop personal training, but I had injured my hamstring playing ice hockey, which is something you people don't even know exists. But I'd injured my hamstring playing ice hockey and was off my feet for 2 weeks. And I was like, well, clearly this isn't a viable long-time career. There needs to be something else. And I was just looking for anything though, man. I wrote 2 business plans for smoothie operations. I studied residential real estate investing for 6 months. I mean, I was looking for anything. And in one of these books, Multiple Streams of Income by somebody named Robert G. Allen, I came across the term infopreneuring, which now seems obvious. Yeah, you can sell your information on the internet, but like back in 2008, it was new and it was kind of this underground movement. And at the center of what this guy was saying in this book was write a book about something that you know about. And when you do, you can build all of these streams of income around it. And that's how it came about. And so to write the book, I was like, okay, what the heck am I going to write? So I walked around with a clipboard every single day, training my clients, selling clients. I was doing in-service trainings for our staff. I was hiring staff. And at the back of my clipboard on the back page, everything I did, I would just write down on the back of my clipboard. Picked up a piece of garbage. Client asked me about this thing. Somebody came for a referral, whatever it was. Just wrote down very, very quickly what the situation was. And then I went home at night and I just wrote out what I did in that situation. That was Ignite the Fire, was that process.
And was your first edition of that book, was it a collaborative affair as well, in terms of you consulted with other professionals and got their insights and their stories, or was it purely your own research?
It was my own. I mean, I called up people that I knew for sure. I mean, I got to know people. But I mean, I was by myself in a small boutique studio in Toronto, Canada. Like, I didn't have any network. I mean, I started going to events near the late stages of the book because I figured I should probably figure out a way to get people to buy this book. So I started going to events to shake hands. And as I did that, and then even like, how did I find my editor for the book? Like, I was so blissfully ignorant on all of the things that you shouldn't do that I just did them, which I think is like, I call it optimistic ignorance now. I think that a lot of the time we know too much about something and that stops us from doing it. I'm actually fascinated by the line. I call it the ignorance quotient. Like by this line where we know enough about something that we can responsibly take action on it, and any more of it actually might be a detriment. and I feel like often we know way too much about stuff that we start to second guess it. We actually need more ignorance so that we actually do stuff and try stuff and create some courage and make mistakes, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, what happens when we try things is we realize that if you try stuff, it's almost never going to work out the way that you originally intended it. And it's almost certainly going to work out in a way that you could have never anticipated unless you actually tried it in the first place. And you would never know that if you didn't try it. And so how did I find my editor for the book? I didn't know any editors. I didn't know anybody in publishing. I went to the bookstore and I looked at every fitness book and I wrote down the names of the authors and I Googled them and I found their emails and I cold emailed every single one of them asking to be introduced to their editors. That's like, and they all answered. And I ended up working with Brad Schoenfeld, who, I mean, is still a friend of mine now. I ended up working with his editor. I mean, that's like, how else do you find people, right? You just email them.
Have
Yeah,
you
man.
someone who's been able to kind of take that process and break it down? Like when you tell that story, it seems so, well, it does seem so industrious, but you've taken it down and broken it down into a process. Has that always been the case, or has that been a skill that you've developed?
There's a term called confabulation. Basically, it means post-rationalization. And what it means is that humans, there's a lot of argument in behavioral psychology of whether humans are rational or irrational. And it seems reasonably clear now that humans are neither. They're post-rationalizing species. Basically, we don't really know what's going to happen. We can make best guesses. But what we are really good at is post-rationalizing, creating a plausible sounding narrative of why something happened after the fact and smoothing out the curve. And so I've sort of gained comfort in that and then built, I wasn't always like this. No, not at all. I always had a really hard time thinking about consequences, for better or for worse. I just kind of did stuff. And I don't really know why that is. Like my first ever speaking engagement was in front of 500 people. Like I just walked out on stage. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna talk to people. Like, I don't know why that is. So I'm sure that contributes. But now in terms of sort of this mental model, which I'm fascinated by, like building mental models that are dangerous. I think the biggest competitive advantage that anybody has in the marketplace these days is to be able to make objective decisions, to be able to use logic, to be able to look past bias and emotion. It's information is abundant, skill is abundant, processes are actually abundant. They're all really easy to come by. What's really, really difficult is being able to logically make sound decisions, especially when you are emotionally charged or when you're being influenced one way or another. And so building mental models, I think, is very, very important around that. And so one of the mental models that I've worked very hard to build is being able to rationalize fear and build courage by being able to quantify when I can take risks and how I can take risks and how I can actually justify those risks in my own head. Because a lot of the time when we fear things, like Seneca once said, if you wish to stave off all fear, imagine that the worst that can happen most definitely will happen. Fear is something that exists in our minds way more than it exists in reality. And if you actually make sense of what could happen in a worst case scenario, it's almost never as bad as whatever we imagine it. And so the first step is to actually make sense of, like, in a worst case scenario, if I do this thing, if everything goes horribly, what's going to happen. And then you can look at it and you can say, okay, well, I'm always going to look for what's called asymmetric opportunities. I'm always going to look for opportunities with greater upside and lower downside. Because I don't really know, right? Like I can make a best guess, but if I'm going to invest time or money or effort into something, put myself out there or whatever, I don't really know what's going to happen. It could go wrong, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, no matter who you are, it could go wrong. And that's fine. Because two things will happen. One is it'll go right, and that's great. The other is, well, three things could happen. One is it will go right, and that's great. One, which is the most likely, is it'll go reasonably well in a way you didn't anticipate, and then you learn from that, and then you keep making it better. And the other is it could go horribly wrong. And the interesting thing is when it goes horribly wrong, you realize that it's actually probably not anywhere close to as bad as you envisioned it. And that actually gives you a lot of courage to take action the next time. Because over time, when enough things goes wrong in a manageable way, you gain a lot of courage that you're going to be able to figure it out, because you always figure it out. You know, it's like, did you die? It's like, no, you're good. You're here to live another day. And so part of that mental model, going back to it, is what's my upside? What's my downside? I will never take any action that could get me taken out of the game. That's number one. Never. It's just, I will just never, it doesn't matter how big the potential upside is. I will never risk getting taken out of the game. So if the potential risk, if everything goes wrong, means that I suffer severe enough reputational damage or financial damage that I'm taken out of the game, no chance.
Yeah.
And then the final is, like, I'm always looking for opportunities, this asymmetric risk that has disproportionately large positive results in return for time and money invested. So how do you invest your time? Do you invest your time getting a little bit better at teaching the squat or learning the squat? Or do you invest your time up-leveling your sales or branding skill set? Well, I mean, the second one is going to have a disproportionately positive result for time and money invested for most fitness professionals worth their salt. So I'm going to take my time learning that. So just continuing to kind of build out those models, how they work for me. And this isn't me telling you that this is how I think they should work for you. But I think it's very important to think very deeply about what those models are for you and how you want to live in them, and then test them. Try to break it.
John, can you give an example? I love the ignorance quotient, and then I love the asymmetrical risk kind of paradigm that you use or filter that you use. Can you give an example of where you've applied it recently to an opportunity, and where it's led you? Maybe two examples. One where it's saved you, or stopped you from making a regretful decision. And then the other one where it's really served you, and you're glad that you put it through this filter and these decision-making models.
Sure. When COVID hit, we had a host of almost every major educational body worldwide reached out to us and wanted to either license or resell what we have or buy us outright. And we had a lot of very interesting negotiations with them. The largest fitness certification company in the world, obviously it's in the US, the top three are in the US, but the largest in the world, we got very, very deep in negotiations with. And long story short, this is an example of when it was not worth it. We recognized that there would probably be a negative asymmetric risk, because in order to do the deal with them, they were going to slash our prices and discount and bundle and budget us basically into oblivion. And so it would have been a case of short-term win for potentially pretty serious long-term damage. And we also identified correctly, judging by their actions moving forward, that they actually didn't care about quality or anything they were saying us. They were just trying to appease us because they basically built their own program in 3 weeks and started selling it, and it's a piece of crap. But that's another conversation altogether. That's one. In terms of positive asymmetric risk, so I mean the yardstick moves, right? Like how much I can invest into a project or something like that changes as you grow your business. You know, at the beginning, like $1,500 for a website was some crazy expense. Now, you know, Gary's aware of this. We came out more recently with something called online trainer coaching. So we built an online fitness coaching program of our own where we actually specialize, as far as I know, it's the world's first online fitness coaching program that specializes in working with fitness professionals and nutrition coaches. So our clientele is fitness coaches, nutrition coaches, and we work with them on their fitness. And the vision, I'll let you guys in on the secret here. The vision is not that we're doing a coaching business. The vision is that we built an algorithm for coaching that we're testing out with coaches that we're then going to pull off and build into software that we're already in talks with some of the largest gym chains in the United States about licensing it to them. Because it's just a better way. It's basically a way to what I believe is perfect the hybrid personal training model, leveraging technology for scale and automation and efficiency. For cost effectiveness, while leveraging the trainer for what they're good at and not having them do what they shouldn't be doing. And so to build all of this out was a significant amount of time and resources for the amount of money that we were going to make from it in stage one. So stage one, we wanted 100 clients paying us $500. This is US $500. We figured it'd be easy to get that. It was, we sent out an email to like a private list, to a small like segment of our list, and we got it within a few hours that day. And so, you know, $50,000 with expenses and legal expenses, we're at like a 15% profit margin on the first beta group. We'll be optimally at about 40% profit with this program. But even then, the amount of dollars and cents are relatively small for the coaching program. But the asymmetric bet that we're making here is that we can test this out with the coaching program, basically cover our expenses, cover our people expenses, build a little bit of profit, and figure out a way to, we're making a bet that if it wins, it will win very, very big, i.e. if we can pull this off. We've already built an algorithm that we're testing manually now that you could easily code into a script and build software around. And then we can do a combination of, we can coach our own clients, we can resell this to trainers so they could coach their clients, we can build a lower down version that's automated, and then we can sell an enterprise solution to gyms. And so that's an example of this asymmetric where it's a bet that we're making that we wouldn't otherwise make with our company because we're not going to make enough money from the coaching program that it would make sense to do it. Mm. But if it wins, it will win very, very big.
It's a great example.
But that'll be 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
down
but
the line, right?
Save your downside as well. I mean, because you're making money on the front end, it's only the opportunity cost, really, right? So that's but
it's the people cost too. I mean, you know, we've got a good team, not a massive team. So if it's not just the money, I mean, there's certainly an opportunity cost in people, in effort, where, you know, if I'd want every one of our staff members to be making us 3 to 5 times what we're paying them on average. You know, with this program, they're at like 1.25. So, I mean, there's a cost there, but you're right. I mean, if you could ever be positive, I guess what the lesson here, if there's a lesson to pull out, is exactly like you said, Dan. If you can be positive on the front end while making a bet for something that could work very big down the road if it goes well, it's a pretty good bet to make.
Yeah, man. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Forecasting, like 3 to 5 years is not that long. It will go down. It will go very, very quickly. And I think that's the step that misses for a lot of business owners, is they're looking at what they can do to get that next big sale, that next promotion, that next smaller step, but that sequential step up of, I'm going to do a medium-sized project, but it's what that project actually enables me to do is the thing that misses from a lot of business owners to get that big opportunity for that big win. And I think that kind of vision is something that is something you've personified throughout your career, because you've tried multiple different businesses and offerings and all
Don't
of,
remind me.
like the wins, the failures, they've all left somewhere. And if you go back to 2008, that's only 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've gained speed from your speed of your growth from that year to now because of that mindset model that you've been applying in terms of courage. It's interesting that you talked so much about courage and fear, because that's where a lot of business owners are at the moment. In Victoria, we're on 6 months of lockdown, and fear
It's
is
insane.
it's just rampant, and people are making all of these illogical decisions and acting out because they're not applying that courage concept to their business. So
Well, it's hard. I mean, I can't even imagine what you guys are going through there. We've regained some semblance of normal here, although cases are going up and it's looking like we might be locked down again next month. But I mean, in business, you always want to work very hard to put yourself in a proactive state, right? You want to be able to make decisions that will feed you in the future, not necessarily just feed you today. But COVID has put a lot of people into a very reactive state. And when you are in a reactive state, I mean, we talk about these mental models. Another one of my very serious mental models and decisions, and something that really guides me, is I never want to be forced into doing something that I believe could potentially have reputational damage, or that I believe goes against any kind of a long-term vision. Like the minute when you as a company have to be reactive at any given day and do things that might go against how you believe you should act, maybe they go against your morals, maybe you find yourself saying things in sales because you really need that sale. It's a very dangerous place to be in. And unfortunately, I mean, you guys and gals over there, much more than us. A lot of people have been forced into that. It's tough, man.
mm.
Very true. It's hard, obviously, when you're in a scarcity state to make decisions that don't satisfy the immediate need.
Well, and so you teach this, Dan, right? Like sometimes you need to satisfy the immediate need, which means you need to make sales.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Like nothing else matters.
Mm.
You got to make sales, and then you can figure out the rest.
Yep.
But you said before, you need to make sales, but sales is often something that we repel as fitness professionals and we avoid, but it's actually an opportunity for scaling. Like it's an opportunity to grow your business. If you get better at sales and you can pass those lessons on to other people in your company, then your business grows significantly. It doesn't matter what your conversion is. If you're getting more volume, you get more clients.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you are in a position where you have to do everything in your business at the moment, there is opportunity for you to create those big step ups, which is what I took from what John said, those big step ups that will help propel you forward.
Mm.
Yeah.
You just have to have the forward vision to do it.
Well, or even looking at like right now, this is what my company needs, right? Like right now I got to sell, which means that the toilets are going to be dirtier, which means that my website doesn't matter, which means my content's going to suffer. Like at a certain point in time, you've got to pound the pavement, proverbial or not. You've got to knock on some doors. You've got to talk to a lot of people. Like that's just, the branding might have to take a step back if you need to, like it's very easy and unfortunately very common for everybody to do more of what's comfortable in a time when you're uncomfortable. And oftentimes when you're uncomfortable, the comfortable is the opposite of what you should be doing. Like you should not be working on, how pretty your website is or trying to decide on the colors of your logo when you need to make sales. Like you should be knocking on doors. You should be messaging people. You should be reaching out to everybody you possibly can and having conversations, right? But it's uncomfortable. So it's hard to do, and it's easy to justify to ourselves I mean, I do this. It's easy to, everybody does this. This is human nature. It's easy to justify ourselves that we're taking action in a positive direction when we're doing things that is perhaps productive, but not productive in the right way. You know, like what's the best software for online training? It's like, it really doesn't matter. Like it really, like use Google Sheets. Don't even think about it. That doesn't matter for you right now. You don't have a client. Like why does the software matter? Right? Figure that out afterwards. Maybe, or maybe not.
It's effective, not efficient. And I think this is like, you need a real level of discernment. And sometimes that's where outside eyes really help, because we obviously have our biases and we also have our periods of comfort, and we always will regress to the thing that is easiest for us to do. And that's why I get a lot of outside eyes on my business, so I can ensure that I'm not doing the easy thing to do.
Yeah, it shines a light in the corners that you hide, because it's easy to hide when you've got so much on your plate. It's easy to hide in corners.
Yes. Yeah. There is there's a book that I read a while back. I've been studying a lot on like what makes effective teams. And there was a book that I read actually by a good friend of mine, Shane Snow. It's a book called Dream Teams. One of the main things that I got out of it is, in every really effective team, there's at least one person who is disagreeable. And
that's scary.
It's scary. I don't know if that's true, Dan. I think it might be the other half of that deal. But you need somebody in your life, in your business, on every team who you can always rely upon to disagree with you, and not be afraid to do so. And that is, I mean, that's what you guys are here for, right? With Dan and his company. I mean, you just need somebody who's not going to be afraid to it doesn't mean you got to take his advice. Right? And that's one of the main points. Like, disagreeability doesn't mean that the disagreeable person is right. What it means is that they force you to second guess whether you're right.
Love that.
And the benefit of that is so incredible. So if you don't have somebody in your life willing to challenge you on everything you do, I mean, it hurts. You want to tell them to F off every minute of every day.
Oh, yeah, I do.
But, and I have members of my team who I've identified as being willing to give me constructive feedback and being disagreeable. And I have members of my team who I've identified as not. And who do you think I go to? I mean, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, right? But I'm not going to ask somebody what they think of a project or what they think of an idea if I know that they're never going to tell me anything negative.
Right. Let's talk about building teams and game changers. If you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll ask John. But let's talk about building a team. We've had multiple discussions about how you allocate your team, and you're very adamant about making sure that you put people in the right roles and the right skill sets to create the biggest, advantage for them, so that they can work in their area of strength, but it also benefits your business. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, in terms of examples of that, and how you kind of started to build that back in your early days.
Oh man. I mean, I'm a terrible manager. I'll lead with that. I'm really, really good at having ideas and putting them out into the world and then never thinking about them again, which is not a great way to run a business. So, I mean, what I realize that I need managers. I need managers, and I need empaths. I need people who are empathetic, because I'm not empathetic at all. Speak to my wife about that if you want. And so, I mean, it's just a matter of knowing yourself. I think psychological assessments are very important, especially if you're a one-man or one-woman show, you've got a partner or something. Do a lot of self-study, do a lot of self-psychological assessments. There's some very good ones out there. And when you do that, you will find very quickly what you need. And then you can begin to identify other people with that, or like have other people who join your team do psychological assessments, right? But I think for a lot of gym owners, I mean, anybody who works in the fitness industry, but I think a lot of gym owners, there's this interesting thing. I mean, the fitness industry, a lot of people don't think about it this way, but it's actually a really young, really immature industry. We're kind of in that like awkward adolescent phase. I mean, the fitness industry started in the 70s or 80s, depending on what you look at the original like trigger of it. But it's like a 40 or 50-year-old industry. I mean, really, it's young. And it has a lot of growing pains. And one of the main ones that I see is, for some reason, personal trainers, which are really at the forefront of it, and people who work in gyms are often expected to kind of do everything in ways that like no humans have all of these attributes and skills. Like it actually doesn't exist in basically any human. I mean, you've got to be energetic, in good shape, good at marketing, entrepreneurial. You've got to be pretty good at science and program design, and empathetic, and like all of those things, and good at sales. All of those things don't really exist in a human, in one single human. And if they do, that human is not going to work at your gym for very long. Because the nature of that person is somebody who's going to leave and think that they can do it better by themselves. You paying them $5 or $10 more an hour or giving them incentives is not going to make any lick of a difference. And so, rarely you might be able to find somebody who stands, but I think the key is, if you really want to grow staff, you have to understand, like, every managerial book ever in the world has a different name for it, but you got to help people identify what, your unique ability is. What's your 5%? All right. What do you do better than anybody else? What do your staff members do better than anybody else? And in a smaller organization, you probably are going to have people do multiple roles, not just work in their 5%. But can you build out a system whereby a number of the roles actually don't need to be done by a human, or you can outsource them? And so in a gym, for example, you actually don't need trainers who are subject matter experts. I don't believe so. Because you as the owner, or you bring in one centralized programmer, for example, who builds the programs, your trainers just need to be good enough to deliver the programs, which really means they need a basic knowledge. They need to be able to tell people to keep their back straight. They need to be able to guide people. More than anything, your trainers on the floor need to be energetic, enthusiastic, outgoing people. And so that is way easier to hire for than somebody who has those skills and is very good at science and programming. And then if you can build in a system for sales, so that trainer doesn't have to do the sales either, well, then you can incentivize that trainer based off of retention, pay them very little for initial clients because they really haven't earned it at all, and incentivize them significantly with retention, because that's really where they've earned their money and made themselves, not expendable. And then finding outside skill sets for marketing. I mean, either you gain it yourself if you decide that you want to be the person who does the sales, or finding outside consultants, contractors, whatever, to generate the leads and stuff for you. Once you have a good system to funnel them in, becomes much more clear cut, and it becomes much more pinpointed of what you hire people for as well. Like if you want a trainer for the floor, you don't need that person to be entrepreneurial, right? You actually don't necessarily want that person to be entrepreneurial. You want somebody who's going to run your business for you and grow your business. Well, then you find somebody who's amazing, they're entrepreneurial, and eventually you cut them into the business so they have some ownership. I mean, that'd be a pretty select one or two or three people, right? And then the final piece of it, I guess, with team management is acquiring skill, particularly in any kind of branding, marketing, designing, advertising, is actually really easy and cheap to find. You can go on Upwork, you can go with the networks, you can hire agencies. It's actually really cheap to find. What's difficult is management, effective management of that skill. And so what we hire for at our company, all of our staff are effectively project managers. We don't try to I don't try to hire people, for example, our art director. We didn't look for somebody who is a absolute expert in design. I needed somebody who knew enough about digital design, print design, advertising design, basically to speak the language. But I looked specifically for somebody who had a lot of experience in managing multiple design projects and hitting deadlines with multiple different types of people. And then we tested him on that and eventually brought him in full time, because finding creatives is easy if you can manage them, and it's cheap if you can manage them. The same with advertisers, right? What's hard is managing them. So find somebody who knows enough about the thing and has enough of an interest in the thing, and then hire managers, and then you can acquire the skill easily. And the best thing about that process, at least when you're smaller, is you can scale up and scale down, right, as business grows.
Because you don't rely on, and the other thing is you don't rely on one person to hold your business together. You've got a team and a tribe around you. You've got consultants, you've got in-house, you've got resources that you pull on, and so you minimize the risk for your business as well, don't you?
Yeah, you don't have the overhead. I mean, you want good people on retainer for sure, and if you find somebody truly great, you can bring them on if it's the time to do it. Absolutely. But then what you're effectively doing, and this is the exact pattern with our company. I basically surrounded myself with managers for every major department, right? For editorial, for marketing, for coaching, for design, for customer service. And then the managers were the managers and the staff members at the beginning. And then as the company grew, they basically rose up because they were always going to be the manager. And then we put, a staff writer underneath them, another customer service agent underneath them. Or Alex is our coach, has 13 coaches underneath him. Right. At one point it was just him.
Yeah.
But you can scale that up and down as you scale up and down.
It's a fascinating insight, John. And this is exactly why we wanted to run this kind of format, because this is an opportunity for every business owner, and there's different sized businesses in this group, to be able to kind of get context of what they see from you online and how your business runs, and then get kind of getting an inside view in terms of the processes and the thoughts behind it and the plans behind it, which is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, folks, just a little interlude. We have about 17 minutes left in this. John has a hard finish on his time, which is beautiful. And I actually want to ask you a little bit about that, John. So if you do have questions, now is the best time to ask, so we can ensure that we get them answered, right? So if you've ever wanted to ask John a question, now is your opportunity to seize. John, there's no doubt that you've done what a lot of us have done over your career, in terms of you've done working up till midnight, working constantly, harder than anyone. But
I wouldn't say that, but hard.
Hard. Let's just say hard. Hard for John. Harder than Dan, but hard for John, right? But
Hey, you guys have time to shave. I don't even have time to shave these days.
I'm half Asian, mate. It doesn't really grow that. So, but I know you enjoy hiking, and I know you enjoy the good things in life for you, getting out in nature, hiking, and all that sort of stuff. So when you were building these businesses, when you were really, and you're still in the midst of it, but when you had a smaller team, a lot of these ideas were just in their early stages. How did you start to incorporate the things that you really wanted in life back in? Were they always there, or did you have to sacrifice them for a while and then come back to them? How did you build that into your lifestyle?
That is a good question.
It's
hard. Yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to really think back. I mean, certainly when I was building, I was, 40 hours a week with clients, the senior trainer at the club. So I was like hiring trainers and onboarding and doing some in-service stuff while I was writing the book and building the PTDC in the early days. And then I went down. So that was like 6:30 or 7:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night. I'd get home, have like a sandwich, and work till 2 in the morning and do on the website, and then do it again. Then I went down to 25 hours a week, then 15 hours a week with clients, and then I eventually stepped away from training. But I stepped away from training about 3 years into the website. I mean, I did both for sure at the beginning for a long time. I think at the beginning, I mean, I guess here's what I'll say. I had the advantage of getting into this young and debt-free, which I recognize as an advantage that is really a massive advantage. I also lived below my means. I mean, I still live below my means. I always have. And that allowed me to step away perhaps earlier and take risks perhaps earlier. I mean, it was both just winning the genetic lottery and being in a family. I mean, I worked all through university as well, but to graduate university debt-free and enter in the working world, to be able to start putting away money and then always living well below my means, and saving money so that when I stepped away from training, I knew that I had time and space, was massive. And even now, man, living below, well below the means, knowing that there's a big amount of space, because I don't ever, and this is in my personal life too, I don't ever want to be put in any kind of position where I'm forced to make a decision that I feel goes against any kind of long-term thinking. So in terms of the early days, I mean, I could work those hours because I was young, right? I had girlfriends, but I didn't have kids. My family was all healthy. I had no dependents or anything. I mean, it's obviously quite different now. If I were to do it now, knowing what I know, if I were to start now, knowing what I know, thinking back and saying, okay, if I was training full time, like trying to make this shift, I would do a very careful assessment of how much money I objectively need each month in order to survive. I would give myself a little bit extra for frills or for, gifts for special people in my life or whatever it is. And then I would have that number and know what that number is. We call that the freedom number in the Online Trainer Academy. That's literally the first thing we teach people. It's like, know what that number is. Are you there yet? If you're not, do whatever you need to do to get there as quick as possible. Because once you're there, then you have the confidence to be able to know that you can step away for a little bit of time. Like if you need to make $4,000, or let's say that you need to make $5,000 a month for your mortgage, for your family, for whatever, right? And that right now, let's say you're making $6,000 a month and you have no spare hours. Well, perhaps then you can give away $500 of work each month and find yourself an extra 2 hours of a week to be able to put it into something that
John is frozen.
He's pausing for suspense.
I know, he's just got us on. There we go.
I gotcha. That was a process that I followed early on too, right? It was just the number was small for me at the beginning. The number was 2,600 for me at the beginning. That's obviously quite a bit bigger than me now. So that's honestly, man, that's the first step to me is if you don't know how much money you need every month for you and your family and your bills, you're always going to be scared. And if you're always going to be scared, you're always going to be paralyzed. If you do know how much you need, you can, and you're not there yet, you can make a plan to get there as quick as possible using the highest yield efforts. This is where online training came about for us. It's not necessarily the most scalable way, but you don't have that option yet, because anything scalable, anything passive takes a long time to build and takes a lot of resources to build. You don't have that option yet. The highest yield thing that you can do right now is you can take on online coaching clients. And so your only job, right, is to take on online coaching clients to be able to get to that point where your freedom number, so that then that you can comfortably take that half day. And that was the process I followed when I went from 40 hours of training a week to 25 to 15 to step away. Was I knew how much money I needed to make. And when I was making that, I knew that I could give away a certain number of hours systematically, which I then could invest into reading and studying and developing and continuing education and testing different projects and whatever, or writing, right? And that, of course, began to work for me in ways over the years that compound.
Because
that have compounded.
You valued your time, and you recognized that your time was your biggest opportunity. If you could free up that time, you could work on the things that would yield you the biggest results if they won. Is that
well, if they won, but even if they didn't win, like producing assets, and I say an asset is like getting better yourself too. You know, feeling like it's okay, you have permission to read that book that afternoon.
Yeah.
That is a hard thing to get over. To justify to yourself that you're going to sit in the library and read a book for an afternoon on Tuesday. Holy shit, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you know that you have that time, I mean, that effort that you spend learning and getting better that Tuesday is going to compound, right? Versus working with clients and making money. I mean, the marginal impact of $1 diminishes every single day versus actually producing assets or reputation and putting work out into the world. It's just, and most people won't do it, which actually makes it more valuable to do it.
I love it. I love it. We've got
I want to ask you about COVID. I'm butting in, Gaz. I'm
questions for the game changers, Dan.
mate. No, I need to ask this because the whole landscape for me of online training has. I'm in charge. I pay the bills, so I get to ask the questions. John, I really am keen to know, the last 6 months, obviously everything has changed in terms of the landscape of online training.
Not really.
What's that?
People have just woken up to they needed it. Everybody always needed it. I've been telling you since 2012 that you needed to do it.
Absolutely. But everyone's woken up. That's the big difference, right? That is the big difference. So obviously that presents opportunities.
Yes.
And on the same time, it also presents, a lot of opportunists at the same time as well.
Correct.
And so
they'll be gone. They'll sell Bitcoin or whatever next year. That's fine.
So how have you navigated the last 6 months in terms of all the opportunities that have been presented?
It's a good question. We shifted our model considerably. We created another level of the Online Trainer Academy that was an essentials level, that was a lower cost level. We obviously converted it. So we had a physical textbook and stuff that we mailed you. We converted it to make an all digital option. We started to offer a 12-month payment plan. So, and then we looked at a lot of other educational providers and made deals and started licensing and reselling. For example, the Australian Fitness Network. We're going to make an announcement with them next week. So they're going to be reselling OTA locally in Australia and New Zealand. So they have the region, whatever it is, the rights to sell that in Australian currency in Australia and New Zealand. So brokering deals like that. What we have done more than anything, so broken it up to make it more accessible, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. A lot of our marketing language has changed. We don't really have time to get into that, but a lot more of a compassionate, facilitative approach to selling. For sure. We're here for you when you're ready type approach to selling. There's been a pretty big shift there, and you'll see more of that from us. And then the other is just worked a heck of a lot more with other people in the industry to work together. We work a lot with Precision Nutrition. We send a lot of business back and forth with them. Basically, we looked at other good companies like the Australian Fitness Network. I won't tell you who the pending deal is in the United States, but one of the biggest certifying bodies in the world, we're going to have the similar deal with in the United States. Looking for opportunities like that, a lot of licensing type deals. It's not quite licensing. It's more like a gray label type thing, but yeah.
So I'd like to, no, shut up, Dan. Because you've been a prolific reader for a long time. You most likely have multiple sources of influences, but Roy wants to know who's been your biggest influencer or mentor in your life, and what actually keeps you like driving forward so relentlessly. Those are two questions we'd really like to.
Okay, the first one I'll say has been my father, and that's like the worst answer ever because it's gloriously unhelpful for everybody listening, because obviously it's not your father. But the reason for that is my dad is the most disagreeable human being you'll ever meet. He is literally an efficiency engineer by trade. His job is to find inefficiencies in logistics and warehousing and distribution for pharmaceutical international warehousing and distribution.
Yeah,
you cannot find somebody who's better at finding fault. So he's been really great because he doesn't understand my business at all, but he's really good at identifying things that could go wrong.
But that's that disagreeable team member.
Yeah, so that's why I think, that's why I thought to mention it, even though it's like unhelpful, because clearly it's my dad and you can't have him. But that idea of trying to find somebody in your life like that, has been very, very powerful. What was the second question?
And then what keeps you driving forward? Like, you've always your means. You could have stopped years ago and still had a great life. What keeps you driving forward for this?
I'm having fun, man. I have a very good friend. His name is Don Dapani. He's an ex-Hindu monk. He spent 10 years in the Hindu monastery. And I asked him I was having a drink. He was having juice in the lobby of a hotel. Funny enough, the lobby of the hotel had a whole bunch of prostitutes in it, and he was laughing about it. So there's your monk story for the day. But really, really good guy. I asked him one time, this is a number of years ago, but I basically said, I was just like, man, like things are going pretty good for me, like way better than I ever thought. I never wanted this. I never desired this, but like, how do I know how much money is too much money? And I expected him, yeah, Kevin, Don Apani's awesome, right? And so, and he's like I don't know if you know him, if you've ever met him, but like he's the nicest human being in the world. And anyway, so I asked him, how much money is too much money? And I expected some like mathematical advice, but what he basically said to me is he said, as long as you're doing work that aligns with your values, as long as you're doing work that he's like, it can be hard. It doesn't need to necessarily energize you all the time. It should energize you globally, but does, like there's going to be hard times, but as long as you're doing work that aligns with your values, as long as you're doing work that you get excited for doing, there's no too much money. Make as much money as you possibly can. But the second it starts to cross that line, that's too much. And that has guided me in more ways than I could ever explain. There have certainly been opportunities over the years that could have resulted in much bigger businesses, whether they would have or not, who knows? But I think the reason why I've been able to stay, pretty aligned, pretty happy for the most part, is I've always stayed within that line, because I've always had that kind of reference check.
That's excellent. That's really excellent. And you've got a bigger fan than Kevin Frazier now, because
there you go.
He loves Don Apani. All the praise, I'll just say, guys, the praise and the stories, we will pass on to John. I've screenshotted it already, so he'll have a chance to review them and see all the thanks and gratefulness that you guys are passing on to him. But I know he appreciates it. We have 60 seconds, John, before we
quick fire, rapid fire. What do you got?
Just one thing you can leave us with. We know where to find you, and we'll definitely fill them in on where to find you. But is there anything that you can drop in 60 seconds or less?
It's never as bad as you think it is if you haven't actually made sense of how things actually are. And it's very rare to actually make sense of how things actually are. And arguably your biggest competitive advantage will always be get an objective view of how things are. What is the actual truth? Let's tell your story for a second, Gary, on the phone last, 2-3 weeks ago? We were talking about you scaling your business and potentially removing you. And you said, okay, well, here's like some stuff that I thought about. correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, if I'm putting words in your mouth, but you basically said, you know, I have this idea and this idea and this idea, you know, people are coming for me, so I can't, you know, so here's a bunch of ways. And I said, I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
That people are coming for your business for you and that people won't buy if it isn't you. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's not true. What I do know is that that's certainly not true. You cannot have 100% certainty that what you said there is true. And so it's very important to run everything that you do through what's called a fog filter. Is this a fact, an opinion, or a guess? Most often, it's not a fact. But the problem is we create these stories in our minds that what is going on is actually fact. And then based off of that, we build a whole bunch of constraints. And if you remove that fact, those constraints go away and you can start to actually build better stories and better plans. So if you don't need to be the person actually delivering the service, which you don't, this hit my ego very hard when I realized that that was true, that all of a sudden my emails weren't coming from me anymore and nobody noticed. Once that happens, the amount of opportunities that open up to you become really, really incredible. And the first step is to say, what are the constraints? What are the truths that I believe that are not actually necessarily true? Because when you do that assessment, when you meditate on that, you will start to figure out that probably most, if not all of them, are not necessarily true. But you've built a whole bunch of constraints that stop you from taking actions in certain ways that are probably better than what you're doing now, based off of those truisms. And so the first step is to get a really, really good, clear, objective, outsider, independent, logical view of what you're doing. And then begin to make your decisions.
That's a perfect thing. I love that fog filter. It resonates for a lot of people. John, I want to say that, and Dan didn't believe me when I said people will come at 6 a.m. to hear John.
Yes.
It will be a win.
I love you guys. Drink more coffee though. You're gonna need it.
But I think people win this morning, and we're very grateful for you coming, and we will let you get on with your afternoon. And thank you so much for your time, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. See everybody.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.